Daily webinar, safety and security tools to help protect yourself online. We're just going to give everybody a couple minutes to join. And in the meantime, sit back, relax, and we'll get started in a few minutes. All right, thanks everybody for tuning in for our fourth webinar in the Civics Pivoting to Virtual series. I'm Maria, and I'm so excited to be joined by my colleagues Andrea and Erica. And we also have a very special treat. It's super early on the West Coast. Ashish Kelsey is here to talk to us all about online safety and security. He's from the Trust and Safety team, so we're so excited to have him here with us this morning. Make sure that if you have any questions, you can just ask them right below. Just submit them with the blue button, and we'll be happy to take questions at the end. And make sure that you submit them all throughout. We'll be looking at them during the entire webinar. So without further ado, Ashish, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Thank you, Maria. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here, and I'm excited that you could join us for this second edition of our security webinar. I know it's a difficult time for a lot of us. A lot of us are working from home for the first time, or we're not used to this sort of setup. So I think it's important that we all think a little about cybersecurity. I know that a lot of us, and I'm hoping that a lot of us take cybersecurity seriously, and we know this is important, but especially now, since a lot of us do not have the luxury of working at office, and do not have the luxury of having that technical infrastructure with additional security systems in place. It's important that we sort of go through and take a quick recap of some of the security best practices. And that's what I'm hoping that we could cover, at least like a few of these points. Security is a really broad topic. There can be so many things that you hear in terms of recommendations. So we're going to touch upon some of these basics today. A lot of these recommendations aren't specifically because of the situation that we're in. These are like general security tips. So even if you're aware of these tips, at least think of this as a refresher. All right. With that said, let's move dig into our agenda for today. We'll be covering about four basic topics, starting with protecting your accounts, and then we move into your devices like your mobile phones, your laptops, and then we touch upon a little about browsing the web securely, and of course it wouldn't be complete without giving you or at least sharing some information about about some of the tools and resources that you could use. If you'd like to read more, or you would like to sort of start using some additional softwares to help protect yourself online. All right. With that said, the first part is protecting your accounts. Of course, you're on the internet. You have your email accounts, you have bank accounts, you have your social media accounts. It's very important that you the first part of when we talk about online safety and cybersecurity is protecting these accounts. And we'll talk about some of the things that you can do. Of course, some of the basics like passwords, and then a few more advanced options like two-step verification. Google's offering for our highest level of security through the advanced protection program, and the security checkup, a quick and easy way for you to make sure that your Google accounts are secure. So let's start with passwords. I know this is something that we've all been using. We have It's a mandatory requirement for us for every account that we start, and it's a big part of online safety processes. Now, whether we like it or not, unfortunately, passwords are the first and most important line of defense for all our accounts. We're hoping that sometime in the future that passwords may not be necessary, but unfortunately, we're not there yet. So make sure that we are doing a good job and sort of creating strong passwords. Now, the reality, unfortunately, is if you look at this list has the most commonly used passwords across the world. Now, in 2020, we still see passwords like 123456 or passwords being used. Now, every year this list comes out and it looks pretty much the same with very minor changes. There might be like tough competition between 123456 and password, but the what we're trying to convey here is that you can see that a lot of users still use easy to use passwords, which makes their account really vulnerable. So using a weak password is like leaving your house unlocked for anybody to come in. So if you especially if you're using such passwords for accounts which has like personal information or sensitive data, you could really be putting that information at risk. So the recommendations in terms of creating strong passwords, it's quite simple. Just make sure that these are long words. You're not Avoid using dictionary words as much as possible. Use a combination of numbers, special characters, and just try to keep it something that's unique. One of the ways that you could do it is by actually creating passphrases instead of passwords, where you can sort of combine two, three words, or take the lyrics of your favorite song, add in some numbers, add in some special characters, and make a strong password. So that way, it's something that's unique for you to remember, and you're not using something that's simple. Another very important thing, and this is something that I know a lot of users who've been on the internet for a while make the same mistake as well, where they create strong passwords, but unfortunately they end up using it across multiple accounts. Now, the biggest challenge with this is that there have been cases where reputed and large websites have been hacked as well, and their password database have been leaked. And of course, we see this happening for like companies across of all sizes. The biggest challenge is if your login details and your login credentials actually get leaked. It keep it And if you're using the same login credentials across multiple different accounts, it puts all your accounts at risk, which is why it's extremely critical that you have like a different password for each account and you don't recycle passwords. So use it especially for your critical accounts. So use a different password for your email, for your social networking, banking accounts, and try to keep it really unique. Don't just change like the number, or don't just sort of make it into a sequential way, because there are lots of ways people could, or hackers could actually get access to your account, especially if it's sort of where they know that you are the target, versus it being sort of like this a, a, a bulk hack sort of effort that's happening, especially since a lot of you work with sensitive data. You could potentially be targets for like very targeted attacks. So which is especially why for users like you need to make sure that you're using unique passwords for unique accounts. I know this is not easy, but some of the things that you can do beside, of course, using passphrases is actually use password managers. There are lots of password managers in the market that you can use. Google has its own, which is integrated with the Chrome browser. Now, the advantage of password managers is that they don't just help, of course, remember and store your passwords in an encrypted way. They also generate unique passwords for you. So every time you have to create a password for an account, you don't need to, scratch your head and think about creating a strong, unique password again. You don't need to like think about, using different songs for passphrases. So you can just rely on your password managers, and of course they store these passwords for you and ensure that you do your research before selecting a password manager. There are lots of recommendations, lots of popular websites that provide their reviews. Ensure that you're using a second layer of verification, and we'll talk a little about that for your password managers as well. And of course, a quick reminder that if any of you have any questions, just feel free to put it in the chat box. You see an option at the bottom of your screen. Just put in your questions, and we'll get to it at the end of the session. Right. In addition to having unique passwords for different accounts, another very important step that you could use is two-step verification. So if there's one thing that I could sort of ask you to take back at the end of the session, is to actually enable two-step verification if you don't already do so. Now, what two-step verification does is essentially adds an extra layer of security for your account. So it sort of combines something that you know with something that you have. Now, the something that you know part, of course, is your password. It's something that you remember, or it's something that you're getting from your password manager, with something that you have. And this could be multiple things. It could be a unique code that comes to your phone in the form of a text message, or it could be a code that you're getting through an app like Google's Authenticator app, or it could actually be a device prompt that you get, which is of course a lot more secure than text messages. So adding that extra layer of security gives you that protection, that even if your password gets breached, and if some hacker or somebody else has access to your password, they cannot log into your account without having the second layer of verification, which is why two-step verification is an extremely effective way of protecting your account. And of course, you could use this with a physical security key like the one shown on the screen. Now, this goes straight into your USB device. Some of them come with NFC enabled, which means you could use them with your mobile devices. Some of them come are Bluetooth enabled as well. So there are lots of different ways by which you can do this. Now, biggest advantage of this is that since it's not a code, it's not sent over like any kind of data network. It's not device specific. It's not coming on your mobile phone. So you need to actually have that physical device to be able to log in, which makes this even among the options that you have for two-step verification, this of course is the most secure option. And another really useful service that Google provides, and again, this is something that I would really recommend this for users, and I think this is the right audience that I'm talking to. If users such as you who work with sensitive data, or you could be potential victims to targeted attack, The advanced protection program is Google's most, it's the highest level of security that we provide for anyone who's at risk. And this was developed, for like people like journalists, people such as you working for the government, or working on campaigns and elections. So that is why this adds additional layer of security beyond what the traditional two-step verification offers. For example, for two-step verification, you can always switch between security keys or other forms of verification. And you can always sort of turn off two-step verification. But for advanced protection program, if you've enabled your account for APP, what this does is that it requires you to have a physical security key in addition to your Google password to sign in. We've also sort of started rolling out the option of using your mobile devices as security key, so that could be a good option as well. Now, the other few advantages that advanced protection program offers is in terms of what kind of access third parties have to the data on your Google Drive. So that's limited only to some trusted services. So even if you've accidentally provided some sort of a third party access to your Google Drive, that information is that channel is blocked. There are also many other useful features that are integrated into advanced protection programs. So if you're interested, definitely go to the link that's shown on your screen. It's g.co/advanced protection, and definitely have a look at this. In fact, we recently just shared some information about the advanced protection, and so far, at least for the users that we know who have signed into the advanced protection program, there have been zero known cases of phishing. So it's extremely effective. I'll talk a little about phishing in the next session, in the next few slides as well. In addition to some of these tools that you have, I think another very simple checkup that you could do is a security checkup. Now, the security checkup is a way by which you can check what's the health of your Google account from a purely security point of view. It's a quick process. It shouldn't take you more than 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the health of your Google account. Now, what this does is it looks at some key security aspects of your Google account, like for example, your recovery information. You can review recent security events, like have there been changed passwords or recovery emails that are associated with your account, something that you recognize. Um, you can look at all the devices that you're logged in with, along with the location of the devices. For example, you might have maybe logged into a computer at your friend's place, or at a hotel or an airport, but you forgot to log out. Um, you can always look at that and sort of disconnect and log out remotely as well. Or of course, if you have like an old device that you've lost somewhere, you can always sort of ensure that you're disconnected from those devices. And of course, if you see anything that looks suspicious, that looks unfamiliar, you can edit those changes. You can change your password immediately. It just takes a few minutes, and you can take this as often as you can. I would highly recommend that you do this every 3 to 6 months. You can set up a reminder to do that as well. So again, very simple tips, very simple sort of process that can just make sure that the health of your Google account is taken care of. Especially if you're sort of managing an organization, and if you have like a lot of users who have Google accounts, I would highly recommend that you ask them to do this as well. Now, moving on to the next. So those are some high level tips on some of the things that you can do to protect your account. One thing to point out is that I did emphasize on some of the things that you can do for your Google account, but a lot of these tips are true across all kinds of accounts. So if you have social media services that you use, or if you have like bank accounts, a lot of course the kind of offerings might vary from service to service, but most large services do offer things like two-step verification or some sort of an account security process, right? So make sure that you do this not just for your Google account, but across all kinds of accounts that you use. Moving into the next part, which is protecting your devices, and this is specifically your mobile devices, your laptops. We'll talk a little about device security. We'll talk about software updates, and how do you sort of make sure that your devices are protected while you're downloading content. The first part here is protecting your devices, especially now that a lot of you might are working from home, or at least some of you are working from home. uh, there could be even though that's a trusted space, you do work with a lot of sensitive information, and you might not want people to have access to the data, including your family sometimes. So it's very important that, especially for your mobile devices, if you have like your work email, or whatever email which has sensitive data, make sure that you're using some sort of a screen lock and a password for your laptops and desktops and PCs and MacBooks as well. Now, we take these things for granted, especially when we work in an office, or when we have the device with us at all times. We might not be too worried about it, but if you're in a shared space, make sure that you have some sort of a screen lock that's set up. And for added security, you can always sort of set this process of automatically setting your screen or your device, you know, for it to lock automatically whenever it goes to sleep. So you don't need to, constantly keep thinking about it, and put your device at risk in case you forget. So those are simple settings that you would see on your device. Just go to your security settings, and or your screen, or your display settings, and you should be able to see an option there. Another useful thing that you could do is actually enabling the Find My Device option, and this is particularly useful for mobile phones. In case you're out and about, and if you say making a run to the grocery store, or if you're still if you're not in California where there's a shelter in place order, but if you can still move out, but you've accidentally left your phone, or you've lost it somewhere, there are lots of things that you can do to ensure that you either find your device, or at least protect the data on it. Now, in some devices, this might be turned on by default. If not, I would request you to just go and look at the settings and enable Find My Device for on your Android and Apple phones. Now, what this does is, even if you've forgotten your device, you could try and locate it. If the GPS is on, it'll give you exact location where the device is. You can also call the device remotely, in case you're not able to find your device. And if you didn't have a screen lock, you can even set up a screen lock remotely. You can also delete the data, so that even if somebody else gets access to your device, they do not have access to that data and information. So lots of useful things that you can do even when you don't have a device. So this is another particularly useful way by which you can ensure your mobile phones are safe. Another thing which is very, very critical is keeping your software up to date, and this is across all. This is for all devices, whether it's your internet browsers, your operating system, any kind of plugin that you use for your work, on document editors, any kind of software. Essentially, you need to keep them updated. A lot of updates come with security patches, like the online abuse space is very, very dynamic. There are new kinds of viruses and malware that we see that are being developed all the time. Now, the biggest risk is, even if you invest in a really sophisticated security system, like a really good antivirus system, it is not as effective if you're not keeping it up to date, because it may not be ready for the latest threats that are out there in the market. So make sure that whatever software you have, especially your antivirus or your operating system, make sure that you update them. Another option, again, is to set up auto update, so that you don't forget that whenever there's an update, it automatically gets installed on your system. Also, make sure that you have the right kind of software to protect your devices. Again, if some of you are now moving from your corporate desktops to personal devices, especially, make sure that you have some sort of a trusted antivirus software to protect your device. Many of them are available in the market for free, so please make sure you do your research and identify the right kind of service based on your needs. Many of them come bundled with other services as well. It comes with a firewall. You might have VPN, parental controls, especially if you're sharing that device with kids in the household. Password managers, and many of them actually cover multiple devices. So you don't actually need to buy a separate service for your mobile devices, your tablets, and for your PC. You actually get like bundled software. So make sure that you have the right kind of software to protect your devices as well. Another thing when it comes to devices is also look at if you can encrypt your devices. a lot of mobile phones, like the Apple phones and the Android devices, a lot of them are encrypted by default, especially the ones which are relatively new. But make sure that just check and see if your device is encrypted. If not, make sure that you encrypt it. Same goes for your PCs as well. The biggest advantage of encryption is, even if, say, somebody gets access to your device at some point and you're not able to delete the data remotely, the data is encrypted, which means that they cannot read the information even if they have access to that data. So make sure that you put in some of these steps to protect your data on your devices. Another very critical step is downloads. We all install a lot of apps on our mobile phones, on our software, be it for work or for entertainment. Make sure that when you're downloading your these applications or software, you always download them from trusted sources. When we say trusted sources, think of them as the iTunes for Apple devices, or the Google Play Store for Android devices, or whatever the official app store is for the device maker. Just make sure that you're installing it from one of those sources. The reason we say that is that a lot of services, like the Android Play Store, there are lots of checks in place which ensure that whichever organization, whichever software development company is putting up the app has gone through a due diligence process of ensuring that the app is trustworthy, and that the kind of data that it's getting from its users is required for the app. And that's an ongoing process. It's not just at the time of it getting into the store. It's even the process continues even once it's in the store. So and we obviously have teams and processes in place which are constantly identifying apps that are violating our policies and taking them off the source. So you're relatively at low risk if you're installing it from these trusted sources. And and make sure that when you're downloading these apps, you check, you go through reviews before you do it. Another very useful thing that you could do is check the app permissions. Like, you could even go back and look at this retroactively. If you've already installed apps, go and see what kind of permissions do they need access to these permissions. And if you don't want them, you can go back to your settings and change these permissions as well. You can also sort of just evaluate if you have certain apps that you've not used for a while. You can just go ahead and delete them altogether. And of course, same advice for as in software. Make sure that your apps are constant, and that you are giving access to sensitive data like your location photos only to the apps that you trust. The next thing, and the next part that we're moving on is browsing the web safely. Now, in this part, we talk a little about Wi-Fi networks, a little about malware alerts, and some of the phishing and the different kinds of scams that we see that quite popular. There are lots of things out there again, so we'll just cover some of the basics to give you a sense of what to expect. Now, the first part is around Wi-Fi networks, and you might have seen these logos around open networks and secure networks. Now, an unsecure network is mostly referred to a network which doesn't have a proper encryption in place, which means that if there are lots of people in a group accessing the unsecured network, and if there's a hacker there, they have the softwares and tools to get access to your data as it's being transferred. Now, that is why we sort of recommend that, especially when you're using public Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi that you're not aware, when you don't know if it's secure or not, you might put your information at risk, especially if you're using very sensitive, if you're doing sensitive tasks, like, for example, like logging into to specific accounts like financial accounts or your email accounts. We would recommend that you be a little careful, avoid it if possible. And but of course, if you're working at home or at your organization, you do know that it most likely is encrypted and it's a secure network, so you don't have to worry about that, at least in this scenario. You also can always use your mobile hotspots as an alternative, where you could set up tether your devices with the mobile data, which is also secure. Um, Watch out for browser warnings such as these. You can't really miss them. This is something that the safe browsing team at Google sort of works actively, and we sort of share this information with Firefox and Safari, and of course you would see this on Chrome. And this warnings come up when you attempting to visit a potentially malicious or deceptive website. Now these are browser warnings, and you can't miss them. And I would really recommend that you think twice before visiting these websites, because these websites could potentially cause your device to be infected by some sort of malware, or it could be phishing, or it could be a phishing website as well. So do watch out for these warnings, and move ahead only if you're really aware of the risks that this poses. A point to note here is that you might come across these warnings sometimes on reputed websites, and websites that you particularly trust. And you might think that, okay, I know this website, I've been here before, and I shouldn't be seeing this warning now. Again, you must remember that if you see this warning, it doesn't necessarily mean that the website is intentionally trying to harm you. It could be possible that the website's been hacked, or there is some sort of a vulnerability on the website that's being exploited by some other organization or hacker, which might be which is why you're seeing this warning. So avoid visiting such websites at all costs. Another useful thing, and you would have noticed this, I hope, is websites which have HTTPS versus HTTP. Now, the main advantage of websites that have HTTPS, and if you see the example that's given here, is that your data, when it's going via a website that has HTTPS, is encrypted, which means that even if somebody gets access to your information while it's going from the website to the server, in a popular kind of attack, which is known as a man in the middle kind of attack, it kind of protects your data, because even if a hacker gets access to your data, they cannot actually read that information because it's encrypted. Now, if you have a website, I would highly recommend that you work with your developer, or check out some of the resources out there to understand how you can set it up. But as user, just make sure that if you're using if you're using a website or a service which requires you to put in like login information, or financial information like your credit card data, use it on websites which have HTTPS enabled. Another point to note is that HTTPS, while the S in HTTPS stands for secure, it doesn't necessarily mean that every website that has HTTPS is a trustworthy website, because it's just a protocol. You could buy it and set it up for any kind of website. So if a website is selling fraudulent products or trying to scam users, they could still have HTTPS. So you still need to do your due diligence before you use any kind of service or online shopping. So understand what HTTP and HTTPS stands for, and that it's not some sort of a certificate for authenticity. The next thing, and again, this is a very commonly used attack, is known as phishing. Now, this is the process of trying to gather personal information using deceptive emails, websites, apps, text messages, where they pretend to be another service that you might possibly be using. It could be like an email coming from Gmail, or from your social network account, saying that, hey, you need to reset your password, or we need this information from you immediately, otherwise your account's going to shut down. Now, what happens in such cases, like once you put in your password and you share that information, they could access your information, your accounts, and or could even potentially affect your devices as well. Phishing is one of the oldest and easiest cyber attacks, but it's still widely used, and it's extremely successful. In fact, based on some of the data that we see, almost 91% of information security attacks start with phishing, and 80% of attacks on businesses include phishing. And especially, there's a specific kind of phishing known as spear phishing, where there are targeted attacks versus the large scale ones that we see. Of course, some of them are very obvious, and not very effective. The ones which are put out saying that, hey, please share your password, or your information to log out of to log in. So people are still aware that there are some really obvious phishing examples, but in case of spear phishing, especially for where they're trying to attack or impact a targeted organization or a targeted user, hackers might actually create a really believable scenario, they would maybe use reference to people that you know personally. They might use references to the organizations that you work with, or have access to information that you think is not widely known or available. Now, these are the ones that you need to really watch out for, especially for people like you who work with sensitive information, or people might be interested in targeting your accounts. Just watch out for any kind of email that seems suspicious. And when in doubt, just directly pick up the phone and reach out to the actual organization reaching out to you, or the individual, just to make sure that you're not falling prey to a phishing attack. To show you an example now, if you see this website, right, there are a few things that you could look. For example, uh, look at the sender, see the email, watch out for any kind of typos. That is a sure shot sign of telling if that's an attempt of for phishing. Now, the biggest problem with spear phishing is that the technical signals are also hard to catch, because these are not sent out in large numbers. These are sent out specifically for the particular recipient, or the particular target. Another thing that you could do is mouse over, just scroll over the URL, see what the actual URL is. Does it match to the sender, to the information that it's asking? That these are a couple of like signs. They also look at trying to tell you that things that you need to act in a hurry, that you have like 4 hours or 24 hours before your account gets logged in. So they want you to take action on it quickly, before giving you time to think, or reaching out to the service at such. And if you see on the right side, these URLs might actually redirect you to a page that look very, very genuine. Like in this case, it's leading you to what looks like the Google login page. But if you look at the URL, if that's clear on your screen, you would see that this is actually not the Google login. So watch out for these kind of attacks, especially the ones that look really believable. If you're not expecting a specific kind of email, I think you should definitely make sure that you think before you click on any of these links. Avoid clicking these links if possible. That's the best thing that you could do. Of course, Chrome has added a lot of phishing protection tools. So there were lots of services that Google already automatically warned users when there was a phishing attempt that was happening on Google accounts. But we offer these services now across all accounts if you're using your Chrome browser. So we have we look against a database of already hacked usernames and passwords that are available, and we sort of match when you're trying to sort of log in using uh, one of these accounts. So we warn you that your password could have been stolen, and we recommend that you change your password. So this was available as a password checkup, if any of you are aware, on the password manager. But now this has been integrated into Chrome directly. If you're interested in learning more about phishing, and if you want to try or look at some of the more believable examples, the ones that you could fall prey to, just check out this really cool phishing quiz, g.co// phishing quiz. This was developed by Google, so you can be sure to trust this resource. And it kind of allows you to look at different emails and assess whether they're genuine or not. And then it'll also give you information on some of the things that you could have looked at. I've taken this quiz. I've got a few wrong myself, so it's very interesting. I would highly recommend that you give this a shot. Shouldn't take more than like 10 minutes. All right. So that covers. I mean, with that we've covered some of the challenges and some of the different issues that we see online in terms of scams and phishing. So we'll talk a little about some of the general tips and resources that you could use to protect yourself. One of the things that you could definitely do, again, is if you're using, of course, since a lot of us are working from home, we'd be using a lot of tools like Drive and other services which allow you to collaborate remotely. Watch out for what kind of accesses that you're providing. A lot of these tools have lots of settings and permission options available inbuilt. So specifically for Drive, look at things like who has access. Try and minimize things that have sensitive data. Don't put it public. Make sure that you're giving access to people in the organization, or specific emails that you trust. What kind of edit rights you want to give them? Do you want to give them edit rights, or just comment rights or view rights? do you want to disable the option of allowing users to copy print? So you can set up some of these options directly on the Drive option on the sort of the Drive settings page, the sharing settings. You can also look at the other softwares and see what kind of options they provide and ensure that you're using the right access options to protect the data and ensure that it goes to the right hands only. Another thing that you could use is the virtual private network, or VPN as it's popularly called. So these are services which create a secure encrypted connection between users and the internet security platforms.
Sorry, I hope you can still hear me. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah. So the other thing that you can use is VPN or virtual private network. So these create a secure encrypted connection between your computer and a VPN server at another location. Now that type of secure connection is a worthwhile investment for anyone who wants to wrap their data in an extra layer of privacy and security, especially if you're connecting to public Wi-Fi networks. But you must remember that VPN is not a magic bullet for the internet security, and it won't make you anonymous online. So make sure that you look at what whether it actually serves the need, and it actually is giving you what you want. And you need to also be careful before you choose a VPN service. Make sure you do your research and due diligence before choosing services. There are lots of free VPN services out there that claim that they provide a VPN service, but we've seen that they're actually malware, which might actually steal personal data. So make sure that you browse with caution, and that you understand what kind of services they offer, and do your research before choosing any kind of VPN service. And of course, like I said in the beginning, security is a really broad topic. We could talk about this for hours, and there are like different layers of that you could get into. So there are a lot more resources on securityplanner.org. I would highly recommend that you check this out. This was created by uh, by industry experts from different organizations, and it has resources for all kinds of users, particularly for basic and intermediate level of users, for to just to understand the different steps. A lot of what was covered today, and some additional tips and services as well. So do check this out. Another useful resource, especially if you're running campaigns, or if you're in any way involved with elections, is going to this resource that Google's created called Protect Your Elections. You can go to the website. The link to the website is shown here. It's g.co/protect your elections. This has like a lot of information, some of which we've covered today, like advanced protection. But of course, we have other tools like Project Shield to protect you from a DDoS attack, and a lot of other useful information as well. So this is something that I would highly recommend if you're in any way working with on election related stuff. And of course, this is what Google offers. There are other organizations that have their own version specifically for their products and tools as well. And in general, for general security, for protecting yourself, for your family, for your children, if you're interested in learning more and some about, again, the kind of tools and information out there, you can always check out this URL as well, safety.google. It's a real URL. It's not a typo. That is the URL. So do go to safety.google for like more general tips and information as well. And with that, we've come to an end of our session. Of course, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to take them now. But if you have any questions, or if you have any concerns that you want to share, you can always reach out to us by writing to the amazing civics outreach team at civics-outreach@google.com. Right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anish. We really appreciate it. And make sure you put in your questions down below. I'm not seeing any questions quite yet. However, Ashish, I'm wondering if you could talk about kind of those security questions that we answer, like your mother's maiden name, those types of questions, and kind of what security do those provide, and how tricky should you make the answers, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm not a big fan of services that still require you to put security questions, but unfortunately, a lot of services still do that. Now, this was sort of like trying to achieve what two-step verification in a way does, where it's adding an additional layer of security beyond just the password. So in that sense, yes, it's nice to always have that layer of security. But if you've seen some of the questions, right, it's like you rightly pointed out, your mother's maiden name or some other information that might be publicly available. Now, if as a user you're putting out the actual information, like if it's your pet's name or your mother's maiden name or the place you went to high school, a lot of this information is already publicly available, which means that if somebody has access to your password, they might actually also know this information to the security questions, which puts your account at risk. So in such scenarios, especially when you're setting up your account, my recommendation would be that you do not give the actual information. Use like fictional information. You make up some other name, just like how you would create a password. So that even if somebody tries to access that information, they know that it's not something that's already publicly available. So what that essentially does is it's like locking your account with two different passwords. So that way it could still be like a strong security process.
Awesome. I think that's good to think about, because I think with the age of all of us putting information about ourselves online, it's pretty easy to look up your dog's name or something like that on your social media. So that's really important to think about when we think about safety and security as well. So I'm not seeing any more questions from the audience. Ladies, do you have any? Oh, I do see one. Here we go.
As my camera was back on. I just want I'm sorry about that.
So Monica has a question here. She says, what steps should be taken if someone clicks on a phishing attempt? So what can they do if they find themselves victim to this?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you have clicked on a link, again, it depends on what that link's trying to do. If it's some sort of because once you click on a phishing link as well, there are a bunch of different things that could happen. If you've actually gone in and put in your username and password in in a website that's trying to disguise as another service, the first and I mean the best thing that you could do is actually go and deactivate or change your password on those accounts, because based on some of the research that we've seen, that 20% of all phishing attackers actually access the account within the first 30 minutes of it being phished. So it's going to be crucial that you take action on your account immediately, go and deactivate the password. And especially if you're using the same password across multiple accounts, make sure that you're changing your passwords across all these accounts, which is why the point about using unique passwords for different accounts is especially important, because even if one account gets compromised, it kind of puts all the other accounts at risk as well. And of course, if you have the luxury of having like a security team, if it's your work email that's been compromised, I would highly recommend that you reach out to your security team internally, so they're aware. So because there could also be a possibility of malware being installed onto your device. So making sure that your software and the softwares are updated, and you run sort of a scan to make sure that your device is protected as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashish. So I see another question here. Do you recommend a password manager?
Absolutely. Password managers are extremely useful because having unique passwords and having strong passwords across different accounts are critical. And the good password, all the reputed password managers also store the passwords in an encrypted format. They give you an option of having a second layer of verification. I do know, and it's a fair concern. A lot of users have the concern of password managers being a single point of failure because all your passwords are in one account, which is why it's especially important that you use password managers that are trustworthy. Make sure you do your due diligence before selecting your password manager, and definitely ensure that you have a second layer of verification for your password manager as well. So once you have those checks in place, I would of course not say that password managers are 100% foolproof, but they're still a very effective tool.
That's great to know. Ashish, do you have any password managers that you recommend?
So I mean, there are a lot in the market. You have LastPass, you have OnePassword. There are lots of different services out there. Personally, I use the one that, I mean, you could say I'm biased towards Google, but I use the Chrome password manager because I use Chrome on my mobile device, on my laptop as well, and I just find I've been using the Chrome password manager for many years now, and I just like the convenience of it syncing between my devices. I've never had any security threats, and of course, I trust Google's security infrastructure. So that's my personal preference. But of course, as a user, you're free to use whichever service that you're comfortable with. But of course, like with any software or password manager, just make sure that you do your research, do your due diligence, look at the recommendations across security websites before you take a final call.
Awesome. Well, it looks like there aren't any more questions from the audience, but Ashish, so much valuable information here. I think, every time you present, I learn something new, and I think about all the things that, I have done already and the things that I could be doing more of. So as always, thank you so much for giving us this wonderful information, because I think at a time like this, we definitely need to think about security. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. My pleasure, completely.
Of course. So thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in to today's webinar. Our next webinar will be next week, Monday. It is at, I believe, 1 p.m. Maybe it's at 3. I should have that date. But our next webinar is next Monday, and we will be covering ways that Google can help you pivot your work to digital, pivot to online during this remote working time. So make sure you tune in next Monday. Of course, you'll receive some email notifications about that, on how you can tune in. It's actually just right here, back where we are today. And look out, we may be adding some more trainings in the future as well. So thanks so much for tuning in today, everybody. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.